When Dr. Burl Ruth, a professor at Iowa State University, heard that parchment had been found in the money pit, he predicted that mercury would be found there too. Dr. Ruth, a chemical engineer, was an avid subscriber to the theory that Shakespeare was just a front, that it was actually Sir Francis Bacon that wrote the plays and poems attributed to Shakespeare. And Bacon had written on several occasions that mercury could be used to preserve almost anything of value, including manuscripts. So when Ruth heard about the piece of parchment that had come out of the pit, he concluded that this must be the repository Baconian scholars had been searching for centuries. Ruth thought it entirely possible that a hoard of manuscripts would be found there that would prove once and for all that Francis Bacon was in fact the author of the so-called Shakespearean works. We are inclined to write this one off as just idle speculation, except for a couple of nagging oddities that keep everyone guessing. For example, there's that business about the mercury.
There has been confirmation that people years ago did use mercury for preservation. And the amount of mercury that must have been on Oak Island would have been enough for either smelting or some storage project that was pretty big.
So far as anyone knows, Shakespeare was not a lawyer, nor well-traveled, nor educated, and he certainly lacked extensive life experience. Bacon, on the other hand, was all of those things, and in addition, was one of the leading scientists of his day. He would have the knowledge and skill to design and implement something as complex as Oak Island has turned out to be. Still, there is no direct evidence pointing to Bacon as either the author of Shakespeare's work or the designer of the Oak Island complex. But all of this only seemed to heighten the desire of the Truro Company to find out what was, in fact, in that hole in the ground. They decided to drill yet another shaft, this time to the northwest. Same solution, same result. At about 100 feet, water came rushing into the new shaft. This time, it took barely 20 minutes to fill the shaft.
One of the workers on the island at the time discovered that there was an area along the beach where at low tide, water would bubble up from the ground. Of course, this was not natural. Apparently what he had discovered was an opening into one of the flood tunnels. They started investigating along the beach. They found that underneath the rock and the sand, there was a layer of eelgrass and coconut fiber, apparently set there to use as a filtration system. They went ahead and built a dam, a rock dam called a cofferdam. This held back the tide, and they were actually able to dig up the beach. As they did, they discovered that there was a series of box drains, approximately 8 inches in diameter. These box drains were like the fingers on your hand. They formed a fan. They converged into one central location, and apparently that's what the feeder tunnels were for the flood tunnels. Unfortunately, before they could find the point where they converged, a storm came along, an Atlantic storm, and destroyed their dam.
The Truro Company was certain they had discovered the key to the Oak Island mystery. However, lacking the time and resources to rebuild the dam, the company decided instead to sink another shaft about 100 feet from Smith's Cove to intersect and plug the flood tunnel. But the men of the Truro Company hadn't even begun to understand the complexity of the task before them.
Somebody had designed Smith's Cove as an enormous feeder system capable of taking 600 gallons of water per minute from the Atlantic Ocean into the money pit. The walls of this feeder system were 4 feet high and 2.5 feet wide at a grade of 22%. The Smithsonian Institute examined the fibrous material and determined that it was indeed coconut husks, and pointed out that it was especially resistant to seawater and might have been there in Smith's Cove for several hundred years. The company's idea of plugging the feeder tunnel was a good one. Unfortunately, they were only able to find one of the tunnels, and they weren't able to plug that one completely.
Someone had built a complex system of tunnels, drains, and filters that worked on a simple principle that's known to every child. If you place your thumb over the top of a drinking straw and insert it into a glass of water, the water won't come up into the straw until you remove your thumb. And since we know how that works, the mystery is solved, right? Sorry to disappoint you, but even knowing how the flood trigger works All the entrepreneurs, researchers, engineers, and treasure hunters over the past 150 years have so far been unable to put the water back in the glass. We can tell you, however, that like those who had gone before them, the Truro Company ran out of time and money and simply gave up. But what of more modern efforts to retrieve the treasure? Do we know yet what the prize is for which the treasure hunters have been willing to give up everything? Is it the treasure that still draws people to the money pit? Or is it the challenge of solving the puzzle? Are we any closer to a solution? Or does the money pit of Oak Island just generate more mysteries? Treasure hunters have continued to return to Oak Island at varying intervals over the years, and while some pieces of the puzzle seem to have fallen into place, no one has yet been able to reach the treasure, whatever it is. Divers have managed to go down as deep as 235 feet into a vast chamber beneath the area of the money pit. They reported V-shaped gouges extending upward, and while they couldn't see the bottom, they could stand on it. Several treasure seekers, beginning with the Truro Company, believe they have solved the riddle of the water trap, but the results of these efforts have always been either disappointing, strangely bizarre, or tragic. By the mid-1800s, 2 workers had already lost their lives. One was killed when a steam boiler blew up, another when he fell down a steep shaft. But not even the superstition that 7 people would die could keep the treasure seekers away. Tantalizing discoveries kept popping up, almost as if the island was teasing the treasure hunters, daring them not to quit.
The island is covered with clues and markers showing that someone did something there a long time ago. Probably the most famous of these is the stone triangle that was found at South Shore Cove. This triangle, if you follow its measurements and follow its lines, mathematically it will take you straight to the site of the money pit.
The money pit. Strange name for a hole in the ground that no one has taken a dime out of yet. Of course, if you look at it from the standpoint of the amount of money poured into it, it is aptly named indeed. And even some of the world's most unlikely treasure hunters have been willing to contribute their share.
Over the years, there have been many famous people associated with the search and the island. In 1909, Franklin Roosevelt became involved with the search. He bought stock in a company called the Old Gold Salvage Company. He actually made 2 trips to the island to participate in the search. Of course, they were unsuccessful, but over the years, even as president, he still followed events on the island. And as late as 1939, he hoped to return to the island, but the impending war in Europe prevented this.
Roosevelt's effort was merely unsuccessful. Others have not been so fortunate. They come knowing the history, even the nature of the problem, but somehow they always seem certain that with the right tools and a sustained effort, they can succeed where all others have failed.
We came to get the 2 treasures up, and I would say that my convictions are stronger than ever that we can do it and will do it.
Robert Restall and his wife Mildred had lived exciting and adventurous